Let's be honest for a moment. Not the polite honesty you offer at a dinner party when someone asks if you like their cooking, but the brutal, staring at the ceiling at 3 in the morning kind of honesty that makes your chest tight. You are tired. You are tired of the math, tired of the arithmetic of survival that you calculate every single day, subtracting anxiety from your sleep and adding hours to your work only to end up with the same sum of nothing. You look at your bank account and you don't just see numbers. You see a reflection of your limitations, a digital scoreboard that tracks every compromise you've ever made, every handshake that felt like a betrayal, and every dream you placed on a high shelf because the rent was due and your spirit was bankrupt. You feel it in your bones, a low-frequency hum of scarcity that follows you from the moment you wake up to the sound of a notification that demands payment, to the moment you collapse into a mattress that hasn't felt like a sanctuary in years. There is a specific weight to the jacket you wear when you feel underpaid, a heaviness in the fabric that has nothing to do with the thread count, and everything to do with the invisible label you stitched into the lining that reads, "This is all I'm worth." You walk past glass buildings and see people laughing inside, drinking coffee that costs more than your lunch, and you wonder what secret code they cracked, what celestial loophole they slipped through, because right now, for you, money feels like a locked room in a house you own, and you've lost the key. The silence between your heartbeat and your next breath is filled with the unspoken fear that maybe, just maybe, this is it. This plateau is your permanent altitude, and the view will never change. The air will never thin into the exhilarating thinness of financial peace, and you will die with the music still inside you, unsung, unfunded, unrealized. You are angry, and you should be, but the anger has curdled into a quiet resentment that you turn inward, slicing pieces of your self-esteem away every time you say yes to a price tag that dishonors your value, or every time you pretend you didn't want that thing, that experience, that freedom, simply because the price of admission required a version of you that you haven't yet built. You've read the platitudes, you've scrolled past the neon quotes telling you to hustle while they sleep, and you felt the hollow dopamine hit of a motivational video that fades before the screen even locks, because you know deep down that grinding your bones to dust on a hamster wheel only leaves you exhausted and covered in the asbestos of your own resentment. The problem isn't the work. The problem is the architecture of your mind. A mind that was handed a blueprint for poverty by well-meaning relatives who feared risk more than they feared regret. A mind that has turned fear into a financial strategy and called it prudence. You are standing at a crossroads right now, in this exact second, and the fact that you are listening to these words means a part of you refuses to die without a fight. A part of you knows the cage is open, and the only thing keeping you inside is a lifetime of memorized limitations disguised as logic. We are about to burn that logic to the ground. This is not a conversation about coupons, penny pinching, or skipping your morning coffee. This is a radical psychological exorcism where we rip out the wiring of peasant thinking and install the operating system of sovereignty. If you stay with me, if you let these 5 rules sink past your defensive irony and into the marrow of your operating system, you will not just change your bank balance, you will change the magnetic field of your presence, the gravity of your demand, and the legacy of your bloodline. Take a breath, plant your feet on the ground, and open the most dangerous thing you own, your mind, ready to receive a truth that the broke world desperately hides from you. Rule 1. The death of the transactional I there is a sickness in the way you look at the world, a virus that infected your perception the moment you understood that paper could be traded for pleasure, and that virus is called the transactional gaze. You were trained to scan reality for immediate profit, to dissect every opportunity with the scalpel of, what's in it for me right now? And in doing so, you blinded yourself to the subterranean rivers of wealth that flow silently beneath the soil of service. When you meet a new person, your ego doesn't see a universe of complexity, a network of history, pain, talent, and connection. It sees a vending machine, and you immediately start pushing the buttons of small talk, Hopping a can of opportunity falls into your lap, and the stench of that desperation is so potent it repels the very abundance you chase. You walk into a job interview, a sales pitch, or a creative collaboration with a clenched fist of need, your knuckles white around the desire to extract a paycheck, a signature, a validation. And because you are gripping so tightly, you leave no room for the current of reciprocity to flow, turning a fertile exchange into a dry, sterile barter where both parties leave feeling subtly robbed. The death of the transactional I requires you to accept a terrifying spiritual axiom. The money is never in the sale. The money is in the residue of connection that exists after the transaction is forgotten, the invisible thread that ties a name to a feeling of safety, inspiration, or awe. You have to shift your consciousness from a hunter who spears a single fish and celebrates a meal, to a gardener who tends to an ecosystem, understanding that if you cultivate the soil, the worms, the water, and the light, the harvest is inevitable, automatic, and requires no frantic grasping. This means when you speak to a stranger who can do absolutely nothing for your career trajectory, you pour such a density of presence into them that their subconscious labels you as high value, and your name becomes a sacred coin they pass to someone who does hold the keys to your kingdom. It means you stop calculating the hourly rate of every favor, every act of kindness, every hour spent mentoring a junior colleague who is floundering, because you understand that the universe pays compound interest on invisible generosity, and the check always arrives from an address you've never seen before. The broke mind is obsessed with the arithmetic of minutes and dollars, trading time for money in a linear suicide, while the wealthy mind understands that money is merely a shadow cast by the light of value. And if you make the light brighter by solving deeper, more human problems, the shadow grows into a giant without you chasing it. Look at your current relationships, the people you text back immediately, and the people you leave on read for hours. I guarantee the ones you ignore are the ones you've deemed useless to your immediate survival, and that cruelty of categorization is the very wall separating you from the land of milk and honey. You must let this version of you die, the version that looks at a human soul and reduces it to a line on a spreadsheet, the version that smiles only when the scent of commission is in the air, because people aren't stupid, they feel the psychic energy of a parasite, and they instinctively close their vaults when you enter the room. The shift happens when you stop asking, "How can I get money from this person?" and start asking, "How can I become the most valuable person this room has ever witnessed, such that money becomes a natural exhale rather than a violent inhale?" Your presence becomes a gift, your attention becomes a nutrient, and your expertise becomes a bridge that carries people from their pain to their pleasure. And when you operate in that mode, the concept of chasing clients becomes laughable, because clients become disciples who chase you with offerings. This requires a level of emotional sovereignty that feels dangerous at first, because you have to detach from the survival panic that screams, "If I don't close this deal, I'm dead," and step into a regal calm that whispers, "I am here to serve, and abundance is a byproduct of my service, not the goal." The moment you release the desperation, your voice deepens, your shoulders drop, your eyes stop darting around the room for an exit, and you become a magnet because you are one of the few people in the capitalist machinery who isn't begging. And in a world of beggars, the king who doesn't need the gold ends up owning the mine. Think of the last time you felt pressured to buy something by a salesperson whose eyes were too wide, whose smile was too brittle, whose commission breath fogged up the glass of your comfort zone. You recoiled, didn't you? Your limbic system labeled them a threat, a predator, and you clutched your wallet to protect your young. And yet, when you walk into a meeting desperate for a raise or a loan, you become that exact predator, and you wonder why the doors slam shut. The transformation is visceral. It's a slowing down, a realization that you are not a parrot squawking a pitch, but a lighthouse standing on a rock, shining a beam into the fog of confusion. and the ships that need your light will navigate towards you on their own accord, carrying cargo you couldn't have stolen with a cannon. Practice this tomorrow morning. Walk into a coffee shop, a bank, a conversation with a family member, and strip your mind of the agenda, strip it of the ask, and just be a force of curiosity. Listen so deeply that the person feels seen for the first time in a decade, and watch how the universe, almost as a bewildered response, starts throwing doors open in the background of your life, because you have finally aligned with the law that riches flow to the giver, not the taker. The money you seek is currently trapped inside the hearts of people you haven't had the patience to love, and until you see every interaction as a sacred exchange of energy rather than a swipe of a credit card, you will remain on the outside of the vault, freezing in the cold of your own self-interest. This is a funeral for your short-sighted greed, a burial of the shallow hunger that keeps you thin, and a resurrection of the long-view abundance that builds monuments. Say this out loud. I am not a transaction. I am a transformation. I do not chase, I attract. My value flows before my invoice. 2. The architecture of unreasonable priority. You are living in a house of cards constructed from the flimsy material of other people's priorities, and the wind is picking up. Can you feel it? The tremor in the walls, the rattling of the windows when you try to work on your own dream, but the phone rings with a demand from someone who hasn't earned the right to your attention. Your life is a manifestation of your negotiation skills, not with the boardroom tycoons, but with the tiny, whining voice in your head that bartered away your focus for a hit of social approval. And you are bankrupt because you spent your cognitive currency on the slot machines of distraction, while the real investment opportunities sat in the corner of the room, unlit and ignored. The second rule that will change your life is a violent, sacred defense of your time, a recognition that time is not money. Time is the soul's fabric, and every time you say yes to a mediocre meeting, a gossip session, a notification that pulls you out of the depths of flow, you are tearing a seam in the only life you will ever get, leaving a scar of lost potential. We have to talk about the neuroscience of distraction, because your brain, the 3-pound fatty lump inside your skull, is sabotaging you with a chemical trap called the dopamine loop, a mechanism that evolved to reward novelty in a dangerous savanna, but which now functions as a leash held by social media engineers and emergency-addicted colleagues who pull you away from deep, non-urgent, high-value creation. Every time your phone buzzes and you abandon the hard task, the cognitive heavy lifting that builds wealth, to read a text about nothing, your nucleus accumbens gets a squirt of dopamine, a little pleasure spasm that trains you like Pavlov's dog to salivate at the sound of a bell that signifies absolutely nothing of worth. You are addicted to the urgency of the trivial, because answering a quick email feels like progress. It feels like a completed task. It gives you the illusion of motion, but it is just a rocking chair in a burning house, and the smoke is filling your lungs while you file your inbox into neat little folders of death. To change your financial reality, you must physically, chemically, and spiritually rewire your reward system so that the dopamine hit comes not from the ping of a distraction, but from the completion of a block of unreasonably deep focus, a 90-minute dive into the work that makes your palms sweat, because it's the work that actually creates value in the market. This begins with a boundary that feels like a betrayal to the people who are used to you being a doormat with a calendar. You must enter a hermit mode during your peak biological hours, those golden 3 or 4 hours in the morning when your prefrontal cortex is sharp and your creative spirits are willing. And you must guard that window with the ferocity of a special forces soldier protecting a diplomat. The notification bell is a liar. It tells you the message is urgent, but urgency is the enemy of importance, and wealth is built exclusively on the important tasks that have no deadline but which compound into an empire. The manuscript, the business plan, the strategic relationship, the skill acquisition that nobody is screaming at you to finish. Look at your to-do list right now and feel the physical sensation of nausea that rises when you realize most of those tasks are just favors for people who are executing their own priorities, using your life force as free fuel. And the only way to stop this is to become completely unreasonable in your demands for solitude. You must disappoint people. You must let the phone go to voicemail. You must watch the unread count climb to a number that would have given you a panic attack a month ago. And you must sit with that discomfort, breathing through the anxiety of being unavailable, until you realize the world doesn't collapse when you're not holding it up. And in fact, your value increases because scarcity creates prestige. When you are always available, you are perceived as a commodity, a public utility that can be tapped at will. But when you are difficult to reach, when you emerge from your cave of creation with a masterpiece rather than a minute-by-minute commentary on the trivialities of existence, you become a legend, and legends can price their services however they like. This rule also applies to the internal noise, the self-talk that tells you to watch that video, to scroll that feed, to indulge in the mental pornography of other people's highlight reels, while your own real life gathers dust. You have to install a mental circuit breaker that asks, is this action moving the needle of my net worth, my spiritual depth, or my health? Or is it simply a sedative for the anxiety of existence? The sedative always makes you poorer. The hard work always makes you richer. And the gap between your current state and your desired future is simply a measure of your tolerance for boredom. Because the wealthy can sit in a room with a blank canvas and no stimulation, and conjure a reality from the void, while the poor need the constant drip of entertainment to distract them from the tomb they're digging. The nervous system of a high earner is trained to embrace the friction, the resistance, the heavy silence of a focused brain, knowing that the neurons are wrapping themselves in myelin, insulating the circuits of skill, and building a superhighway of competence that the market will pay a premium to access. If you are a salaried employee, this rule demands you stop acting like a paid serf and start operating like a mercenary consultant who happens to have one client right now, using your job as a paid gym to build skills so sharp that your employer fears losing you, rather than you fearing the annual review, shifting the balance of power by making your output so uniquely dense that your name becomes a verb in the company's mythology. If you are a parent trying to build a side business, this rule requires a ruthlessness with your sleep schedule, waking up at an hour that feels like a crime against comfort, stealing the silence of the dawn to build a ship that sails your family out of the choppy waters of paycheck dependence, because sacrificing an hour of sleep to build an asset is a deposit of love, while staying up late to watch a series about fictional lives is a withdrawal of legacy. The architecture of unreasonable priority looks like a calendar that only has 3 blocks in it: deep work, deep regeneration, and deep human connection. Everything else is noise and debt, and you must prune the branches of your life so savagely that people call you obsessive, because obsession is the price of entry to the top 1%, and the bottom 99% will always call the top 1% crazy to protect the ego of the mediocre. You must feel the guilt of saying no, and do it anyway, feel the burn of missing a party, and light a candle of creation instead, because the money is in the unbroken thread of thought, the jewel that emerges when you stay with a problem for 4 uninterrupted hours and find a solution that a distracted competitor will never find. Reclaim your attention span as if it were a kidnapped child, because in the attention economy, the one who programs the trance holds the wealth, and if you are always in the trance of another's programming, you are the product. Not the producer, and the product never gets paid, the product gets sold. This is your declaration of independence from the tyranny of the trivial, a manifesto that states your mind is not a public square for every passing peddler of nonsense, but a sacred temple of profit, and only the high priests of priority are allowed past the velvet rope. From this moment forward, the question is not, do I have time? Because you have the same 24 hours as everyone else, the question is this activity the highest possible use of my existence in this quantum slice of the clock? And if the answer is no, you kill it without mercy. You assassinate the distraction, and you do not attend the funeral because you are too busy building a castle. Say this out loud. My attention is a currency more valuable than gold. I spend it on my empire, not on the amusements of peasants. I am unreasonably focused, and my results terrify the distracted. 3. The alchemy of high-value pain. You have been running from pain your entire life, sprinting away from discomfort with the desperation of a gazelle fleeing a lion. And in that flight, you have bypassed every doorway to wealth that was ever placed in front of you, because those doorways are always, without exception, hidden inside the flames of difficulty that your comfort-seeking mind has labeled as bad. The third rule is the alchemy of high-value pain, the secret knowledge that the tolerance for specific, intentional suffering is the only uncorrelated asset that cannot be taxed, inherited, or stolen. And it is the raw ingredient from which all fortunes are forged in the smithy of human resilience. Let's look at the neurochemistry of this avoidance. Your brain is a prediction machine, and its primary function is not to make you rich. It is to keep you safe and warm and fed on the savannah, and it makes no distinction between the saber-toothed tiger of the Paleolithic era and the social saber-toothed tiger of a failed business launch, a rejected proposal, or an awkward sales call that might end in a slammed door. The amygdala, the almond-shaped sentinel of fear, fires a warning shot of cortisol, and you immediately retreat. You pick up the phone to scroll. You eat something sweet. You procrastinate. And in that retreat, you train your brain that the discomfort was a real threat, solidifying a phobia of the very actions that generate economic ascension, a process called negative reinforcement that keeps you locked in a velvet cage of a mediocre salary. The wealthy individual is not fearless. The wealthy individual has simply run a psychological bypass surgery on the amygdala, rerouting the fear response from a stop sign into a green light, a signal that says, "This terror you feel is the scent of growth. Lean into it, bite down on the mouthguard, and find the treasure that waits exactly 17 seconds after the urge to quit." This is the alchemy, the ability to take the leaden weight of social rejection and transmute it into the gold of a tenacious sales record, the ability to take the burning sting of public criticism and refine it into the fuel that powers a creative masterpiece that redefines a genre. You must start a relationship with pain that is not masochistic, but strategic, a surgical selection of hard things that yield a compound return, like the muscle that tears in the gym and grows back denser and stronger, a process of hypertrophy that applies equally to the biceps and to the balance sheet. The broke mind seeks the path of least resistance, the smooth, well-paved road of the employee who never rocks the boat, never asks for a raise, never pitches an idea, and that road leads with absolute geometric certainty to the gray landscape of quiet desperation where the inflation monster eats your purchasing power while you sleep. The path of wealth is a steep, rocky climb where the air is thin and the criticism is loud. But the altitude of your income is directly proportional to the weight of the problems you are willing to solve. And big problems are heavy, thorny, and painful to lift, which is why few people lift them, and why those few command the treasuries. Think of a difficult conversation you are avoiding right now, a client who needs to be fired, a price that needs to be raised, a partner who needs to be confronted about their lack of contribution, and feel the knot in your stomach, the nausea of potential conflict, and realize that not as a thief stealing thousands of dollars from your future every single day you leave the conversation unspoken. The alchemy demands you run towards that knot. You schedule the conversation. You look the dragon in the eyes, and you speak your truth with a calm, grounded voice, knowing that the temporary spike in cortisol will be followed by a long-term elevation in respect, clarity, and financial liberation that far outweighs the momentary discomfort. This applies to learning, the most painful activity for the adult ego, because to learn something new, you must admit ignorance. You must be a fool, a clumsy amateur fumbling with tools that a teenager seems to master with ease. And this bruise to the ego is so unbearable for most that they stagnate on a plateau of competence, never ascending to the mastery that commands expert fees, because they would rather die than look stupid for 5 minutes. The millionaire mind is addicted to the feeling of stupidity because it understands that the valley of despair on the learning curve is the toll booth to the peak of high-value skill. And every time they feel like an idiot, they whisper, "Good, the check is clearing, the asset is loading." You have to fall in love with the burn of deliberate practice, the repetitive, boring, grueling refinement of a single micro-skill that nobody will applaud. The copywriter poring over a single headline for 4 hours. The coder debugging a single line until their eyes bleed. The speaker rehearsing a single pause until it lands with the force of a cannonball. Because the market doesn't pay for participation. It pays for extreme, painful competence that is rare as diamond. Your self-talk during moments of pain is the compass that points to poverty or prosperity. If you hit a wall and your internal voice says, "See, I knew I wasn't good enough, I should stop," you are a financial sheep ready for shearing. But if you hit that same wall and your internal voice growls, "Good, this is the filter that eliminates the weak. Now I find the way over, under, or through," you are a financial predator, and the walls become your stepping stools. The body language of the high pain tolerance individual is a paradox, a relaxed intensity, a looseness in the shoulders and a steel in the eyes, a posture that signals to the nervous system that the current stress is manageable, that the danger is a choice, not a threat. And this somatic state keeps the prefrontal cortex online, allowing creative problem solving rather than the reptilian freeze-or flight that makes you dumb and compliant. You can train this today by taking a cold shower, by fasting for 16 hours, by sitting in silence with your painful thoughts for 30 minutes without reaching for a digital pacifier, building your discomfort muscle in the small things so that when the big, existential financial pains arrive, you have the granite core of a stoic warrior, not the brittle shell of a comfort addict who shatters at the first sign of frost. The environment that surrounds you must also reflect this alchemy. Your walls should have symbols of difficulty overcome, books you've read that made your brain sweat, trophies of projects that almost broke you, not to impress visitors, but to remind your subconscious that you are a being who transmutes pain into power, and that this current hardship is just the raw material for the next monument. The relationships you maintain will either amplify this rule or destroy it. If your closest circle is a group of comfort enthusiasts who whine about the weather and the government and never push their own limits, their contagion of learned helplessness will seep into your pores, and you will start to believe that pain is a sign to stop, rather than a signal to start. You must curate a tribe of alchemists, people who chase the grueling challenges, who train for marathons and launch businesses and have difficult conversations with a glint of joy in their eyes. Because you become the average of the 5 pain tolerance levels you surround yourself with. And if you're the toughest person in your room, you're in the wrong room, suffocating in a bubble of your own superiority. The financial markets are a massive psychological screening device. They are designed to transfer wealth from the impatient, the comfort-addicted and the emotionally volatile, to the patient, the disciplined and the pain-tolerant. And this transfer happens silently, automatically, and without any appeal process. So you either harden your mind or you hemorrhage your resources. Stop asking for an easy life, because an easy life makes you a soft, forgettable character in a story nobody tells. And start asking for a difficult life that breaks you open and reveals the ferocious genius that was buried under decades of soft, suburban sedation. The money is on the other side of the pain. It is always, poetically and practically, on the other side of the door you are most afraid to open. The door of the cold call, the door of the honest feedback, the door of the solo venture, the door of the early morning when the bed is warm and the dream is cold. And the only way through that door is to grip the handle with a sweaty palm, breathe into the fear, and walk into the fire like a mythical god forging a new world from the ashes of your former self. This is the law of alchemy. No lead, no gold, no crucible, no crown, and the crucible is hot, and it hurts, and it is the only way. Say this out loud. I am an alchemist of adversity. I transmute pain into profit, fear into fuel, and rejection into redirection. The fire forges me, it does not finish me. 4. The energetic gravity of stewardship. You are a hole, a void, a cosmic drain, and until you become a conduit instead of a cul-de-sac, the money will continue to slip through your fingers as if greased by your own insatiable need. Because the fourth rule is a paradox that shakes the foundations of the greedy mind. You must become a steward, not a hoarder, a guardian of capital flow, not a stagnant reservoir of paper. And in that stewardship, you unlock a gravitational force that pulls wealth towards you with the inevitability of a planet orbiting a star. The psychology of the poor man is the psychology of the clenched fist, a hand that grips coins so tightly that it cannot receive a gift, a posture of defense that screams to the universe, "There is not enough. I must protect my scraps." And the universe, being a faithful mirror of your internal state, responds with a scarcity so profound that every car repair, medical bill, and unexpected expense feels like a targeted assassination of your peace. The psychology of the wealthy steward is the open hand, a relaxed palm that knows the nature of energy is flow, not stagnation, a hand that can give and receive with the same effortless motion, reflecting a subconscious belief that the source is infinite and the pipes are clean. So money arrives, circulates, and returns multiplied, as naturally as the tide. You must audit your relationship with money when you are alone, when nobody is watching, when you open your banking app. Do you feel a constriction in your chest, a fear that it will vanish, a resentment towards those who have more, a desperate clinging to every digit, because that emotional charge is a magnetic frequency that repels abundance, as sure as a negative pole repels its twin? We have to talk about the science of the prefrontal cortex and delayed gratification, the famous Stanford marshmallow experiments that revealed not just a child's ability to wait for a second sweet, but a fundamental brain mechanism that separates the high achiever from the impulsive spender, the executive function that overrides the limbic, "I want it now," scream, and calculates the compound future value of a resource. Stewardship is the adult manifestation of the marshmallow test. It is the ability to see a dollar today not as a unit of consumption, but as a seed that can be planted in the soil of an index fund, a business, a skill, or a relationship, and watered with the patience of decades until it becomes a forest that shades generations you will never meet. If you have a scarcity wound, usually inflicted in childhood by watching parents fight about bills, by the silent tension of "we can't afford it," by the use of money as a weapon of control or a symbol of safety that was always absent, you carry a trauma response that activates every time you see a large sum or, conversely, a zero balance. And that trauma response hijacks the rational brain and forces you to make impulsive, destructive decisions. The steward heals this wound by reparenting themselves, by looking at their bank account with a neutral, compassionate gaze and saying, "This is a tool, this is a measure of the value I've delivered. It is not a measure of my worth as a human. It is not my savior, and it is not my enemy. It is just a mirror of my internal state of clarity and service." You must physically practice the act of giving, not to get something back in a fake prosperity gospel shakedown, but to condition your nervous system to release the death grip, to prove to your amygdala that letting go does not result in immediate annihilation. And in fact, it results in a warm, electrical sensation of power, a feeling that you are so resourced you can afford to nourish another, which confirms to the subconscious that you are wealthy, and the subconscious always, unfailingly, moves you towards behaviors that align with your identity. Take a percentage of every single dollar that enters your life, even if it's $1, and root it into an investment and generosity account, an account that is only for planting seeds and feeding others, and watch how this small ritual shifts your identity from consumer to custodian. a subtle shift that changes every spending decision from a vote for immediate gratification to a vote for eternal legacy. The body language of a steward is a calm, slow, dignified presence, not a frantic, fidgety, nervous energy of the gambler who checks the ticker every 5 seconds, because the steward knows the harvest is governed by seasons and cycles, not by the twitching of a mouse on a trading platform. And this slowness allows the higher brain functions to engage, making decisions that look boring in the short term but become geological in the long term. The environment of the steward is one of quality over quantity, a minimalist elegance where objects are chosen for their durability and their ability to elevate the spirit, not their ability to signal status to strangers, because the steward knows that a cheap, fast fashion item that falls apart in 3 washes is a tax on the poor, while a hand-stitched, timeless piece is a dividend paid to the future self who still wears it a decade later. You must set boundaries not only with your time, but with your capital, becoming ruthless about the leaks in your financial boat, the subscriptions that nibble at your freedom, the small, mindless swipes that add up to a river of lost potential, plugging these leaks not from a place of deprivation, but from a place of sacred protection, as if you are guarding a holy flame that must be passed to the next generation. The relationships of the steward are generous but not parasitical. You become a giver of insight, a connector of dots, a financier of dreams, but you also erect a steel wall of discernment that prevents energy vampires from tapping your veins, because your capital is a life force stored in potential, and to waste it on someone who will not transmute it into growth is a sin against your own purpose. The internal dialogue of the steward, when faced with an unexpected windfall, is not a frantic, "What can I buy? How can I show this off? How can I signal my arrival?" but a deep contemplative, "How can this serve the mission? How can this secure the family? How can this fund the solution to a problem that plagues my community?" This shift in questioning redirects the dopamine from the shallow pool of consumer novelty to the deep ocean of meaningful empire construction. The flow of money is like the flow of water. If you dam it completely, it stagnates, grows algae, and breeds disease. But if you channel it wisely, creating canals and reservoirs that irrigate the fields of your purpose and the thirst of your tribe, it yields a harvest that multiplies 100-fold, and you become the aqueduct, the essential infrastructure through which life flows. And life is always willing to flow through a vessel that doesn't leak and isn't blocked by the debris of fear. Stop looking at your net worth as a scorecard of your ego, a static number you polish like a trophy, and start seeing it as a dynamic, breathing indicator of your stewardship capacity, a number that rises precisely as your ability to handle the pressure of a large vessel rises. Because if a small cup tries to hold a gallon, it shatters. And most lottery winners are small cups who shatter spectacularly under the weight of a resource they never trained to hold. You must train to hold more by becoming a person of depth, a person who can sit with big sums of money and feel no need to disperse them in a spasm of consumption, a person who can hold the tension of a volatile market and not sell at the bottom, a person whose emotional stability is a gravitational mass that calms the chaotic frequencies of the financial world and draws order from the chaos. This rule is a death to the peasant mentality of spend it before it disappears, and a birth into the sovereign mentality of I am a temporary guardian of this resource, and I will return it to the stream with added value, a legacy of growth, and a path of light for those who follow. And in that sacred contract, the stream rewards you with an unending flow. The test of this rule is simple. Look at your last $100 of disposable income. Did it go to a fleeting pleasure that you don't even remember a week later? Or did it go to a book that rewired your brain, a stock that owns a piece of the future, a gift that lifted a friend's burden? And your answer to that question, repeated over a lifetime, is the single keystone determinant of your financial destiny. Say this out loud. I am a steward of abundance, not a hoarder of scraps. Money flows to me because it trusts me to grow it, guard it, and deploy it for a purpose higher than my own comfort. I am an open channel, and the stream is infinite. E5. The manufactured scarcity of the sovereign self. You have been cheap, and it is killing you. You have been a bargain brand in a luxury market, discounting your soul by 15% every time you sense a hesitation in the buyer's eye. And the fifth and final rule is the annihilation of this groveling self-valuation, replaced with the absolute, unshakable, manufactured scarcity of a sovereign being who knows their worth is non-negotiable, and that the price of entry to their world is high, because the value inside is transformative and rare. The market does not pay you for your time. The market pays you for your perceived replacement cost, the difficulty with which you can be substituted by a cheaper, faster, or more compliant clone. And if you are always affable, always available, always discounting your rate to be competitive, or just get the foot in the door, you are signaling to the primal economic brain of the buyer that you are a commodity, a grain of wheat indistinguishable from the next, and the only lever you have is to lower the price until you are grinding yourself into flour. The psychology of premium pricing is rooted in a deep, somatic self-respect that comes from a track record of delivered transformation, but more importantly, from a future projection of the value you will bring, a forward-leaning confidence that charges for the outcome, not the hours. And this confidence must be manufactured in the quiet hours before the client meeting, through aggressive self-talk and a physical rehearsal of power, a power pose that elevates testosterone and lowers cortisol, literally changing the chemistry of your blood, so you enter the negotiation as a calm, dominant force, rather than a twitchy supplicant. You have to understand the psychology of the buyer. When someone is paying a high price, their brain engages the post-purchase rationalization bias, the cognitive dissonance mechanism that forces them to actively look for the value to justify the expense, making them a more engaged, compliant, and committed client who actually gets the result. Whereas a lowball client will resent every penny, disrespect your boundaries, and blame you for their own lack of action because they invested nothing and therefore committed nothing. The sovereign self does not chase. The sovereign self beckons, and this is a subtle but seismic shift in body language and tone. The disappearance of the please like me smile, the emergence of a calm, still assessment of the prospect, asking sharp, probing questions that reveal the cost of their problem, and waiting without anxiety for them to self-select into the solution. Because the sovereign knows that if someone is not ready to pay the true price, they are not a client, they are a burden. And turning away a burden creates space for a blessing. Your self-talk during a pricing conversation must be a controlled, internal mantra that shouts over the fear of rejection. I am the prize. My solution is a bargain compared to the cost of their continued pain, and my refusal to bend on value is a form of integrity that filters out energy vampires. The environment you create around your service or product must scream premium. The crispness of your communication, the cleanliness of your presentation, the tightness of your timelines, because the subconscious of the buyer processes these micro-signals in milliseconds. And if there is a whiff of desperation or sloppiness, the price plummets in their mind before you even open your mouth. A phenomenon called the halo effect in reverse, where one negative aesthetic cue poisons the perception of the whole. The relationships you attract at this level will change. You will lose the bottom feeders, the bargain hunters, the people who haggle over pennies while bleeding dollars of time, and you will gain a smaller but far more potent circle of high net worth individuals who respect the law of equitable exchange, who pay quickly, who refer generously, and who treat you as a peer, not a servant, because your self-imposed scarcity has elevated you into a different social stratum. You must set boundaries on your emotional labor, because the cheap self is always available for emotional dumping, always the free therapist, always the one who gives away the expertise for a coffee. But the sovereign self puts a gatekeeper on their genius, a protocol that says, my strategy sessions are a paid asset, because within them lie the keys to a kingdom you cannot enter alone, and to give them away is to rob both of us of the seriousness required for transformation. The internal dialogue of the sovereign when presented with an opportunity that doesn't match the price is not a panicked, "I'll just do it this once, maybe they'll see the value later," but a polite, firm, "Thank you, but my price reflects the outcome, not the process. And when you're ready to invest in the outcome, the door remains open." A statement that preserves dignity and often triggers a psychological reactance where the client suddenly wants the forbidden fruit more because it's not being forced on them. The neural pathway of high-value rejection must be burned into your brain through repetition. The act of saying no to a low offer and feeling the dopamine spike not from getting the gig, but from honoring the self, rewiring the reward system to find pleasure in integrity rather than in the servile submission of the pleaser. You have to manufacture scarcity, not by lying about your availability, but by genuinely filling your calendar with high-value output, making yourself so genuinely busy with creation and premium clients that the low-value offerings naturally fall away. And this real scarcity creates a FOMO, fear of missing out, in the market that does your marketing for you, as people whisper about the consultant who is hard to book but worth every cent. The body language of premium pricing is slow nodding, deep eye contact, and a stillness that allows silence to hang in the air without breaking it with nervous chatter, because the person who breaks the silence first in a negotiation loses. And if you fill the void with self-deprecation or a discount, you are literally throwing money into that silent abyss. The tragedy of the undervalued worker is not that they lack talent, but that they lack the nerve to hold their talent back, to create a velvet rope around their skill that makes people crane their necks and wonder what magic happens inside, because mystery and prestige are intertwined. And if you lay all your cards on the table with a desperate transparency, you reveal a losing hand, even if the hand was a winner. The energy of the sovereign is a quiet, magnetic field of, "I will be fine without this deal." A detachment from the outcome that is not feigned but rooted in a solid financial cushion, a diversification of income streams, and a spiritual faith that the universe provides for those who provide value, a detachment that drives buyers wild, because it triggers their inherent fear of missing the boat that is sailing without them. You must take this rule and apply it to your salary negotiation, your freelance contract, your pricing menu, the rent you charge on a property, the terms you demand in a partnership, and you must do it with a steady heartbeat and a straight spine, knowing that every time you raise your price, you raise the expectation of your performance, which forces you to grow, to over-deliver, to become the person who is actually worth that new fee, creating a virtuous cycle of ascension. The scariest moment is the first time you say the higher number, the first time you let it hang in the air like a live grenade, the first time you watch the prospect's eyes widen and you resist the urge to say, "But we can negotiate." And instead you just smile, breathe, and wait. And that moment, that excruciating, beautiful, death and rebirth moment, is where you break the curse of your working-class ancestors and step into the throne room of the economic elite. The manufactured scarcity of the sovereign self is the capstone of the 5 rules, because without it, you can have the eye of a steward, the pain tolerance of an alchemist, the focus of a priority architect, and the generosity of a saint, and you will still be a pauper if you cannot look a human in the face and ask for the true energetic price of your miracle. Your value is not determined by the market. It is determined by the story you tell yourself when the lights are off and the door is locked. And if that story is one of scarcity, you will discount. If that story is one of royalty, you will dictate terms, and the world, which is a colossal mirror, will bow to the reflection of a king, not a beggar. Today, walk to the mirror and practice the line, "My fee is X," and watch your own eyes, and don't leave until your eyes stop flickering, until your voice stops cracking, until you believe with every mitochondrion in your body that you are the rarest asset in the room. Say this out loud: "I am the prize. My value is non-negotiable. I walk away from bad deals because my purpose is too great to be discounted. I am rare, I am premium, I am sovereign," is the end of the script. The 5 rules are not words to be read. They are razor blades to be used to cut away the dead flesh of your former financial self. The death of the transactional I opens your vision to the infinite network of value. The architecture of unreasonable priority reclaims your time from the thieves of distraction. The alchemy of high-value pain transforms your suffering into your selling point. The energetic gravity of stewardship makes you a magnetic vessel of flow. The manufactured scarcity of the sovereign self installs you on a throne that the market cannot ignore. Take these rules and do not merely memorize them. You must marinate in them. You must sweat them out in the gym of your daily life. You must fail at them and correct the course. You must let them annoy you, challenge you, and ultimately, if you persist, coronate you. The world is waiting for the version of you who understands that money is not a thing you chase, but a shadow you cast when you stand tall in the light of your own, undeniable, uncompromising value. Go now, the transaction is complete, the transformation has begun.